But we know we can't go it alone. It's all hands on deck, and so we look forward to having conversations with each and every one of you to get you just as excited about this and get you just as involved as we are. So thank you so much.
Great. So, as they say, let's get on with the show. I want to ask Chastity, Pratt, Dawsey, up to the stage as our moderator. Those of you who read The Bridge will know her byline, and now you get to see her in person. She's going to take us through what I hope will be an exciting conversation. And please note that we want you to be part of the conversation too. So please send up your questions.
Definitely.
All right.
Hello. Allie and Nisha did a good job of helping to get this going in an interactive way. I know you're eating, but we want to have a dynamic and interactive conversation. We're going to have a panel here with a lot of information to share, but I see a lot of you here who also have expertise. I see you, Dr. Mona Hanatisha, right? I see you, Katie Haycock, over there. We're all going to have an interactive conversation. So when you get your card, give us good, meaty questions, and even sprinkle in some information if we skip over some things, okay? So we're all here on the island because we want to make Michigan a better place, right? Either by growing our own businesses, improving services in the state, or maybe trying to figure out how philanthropy can better impact the state, right? So going on this theme of interaction, I want to ask a question. It's an easy one. If we prepare our children, will they help us to make Michigan a better place? Yes. There's a lot of y'all in here. Speak up. Okay, so more clearly, if we prepare our children, will they help make Michigan a better place? Yes. Yeah, they will. If we prepare our children, will they help make Michigan better? Of course they will, yes. So let's get to it. Increasing the bottom line, why Michigan's businesses are investing in early childhood development. We know that early childhood development is health and education. So we're not going to be talking so much about K-12. That's for the sequestered legislature to deal with today. We're going to talk about health and education, our youngest kids, ages 0 to 5. And like Allie said, we're doing it not only because it's the right thing to do, but let's be real, there are economic benefits for us to do this. For instance, Allie told us that in Detroit, for every vulnerable child we put in preschool, we save $100,000. Well, in Michigan, that number is $39,000. So it's not just about Detroit. For every child we get in a good program, $39,000, that's what we save, across the state. What else? $1 at the national level returns $12.60 in both directions. I'm sorry, in both direct and indirect benefits. That's nationally. In Michigan, that's $9. For every dollar we spend on preschool, that's $9 we'll get back. So there's economic benefits here, right? And how about some educational benefits? What do we know? We know that student test scores from 2015 ranked Michigan 41st out of 50 states when you talk about fourth grade reading proficiency. And that's that grade level where we know if you're not reading by that grade level, you're going to have a lot of problems. We're 41st. There's only 50 states, people. And we also know that 1/3 of Michigan children entered kindergarten unprepared for school. Now, some of us will say, well, so did I. I didn't go to preschool, right? I know I didn't go to preschool. A lot of us, we didn't go to preschool. And we'll say, okay, I was all right. Well, this is a new world, okay? We didn't have the NWEA, the TIMMS, the MAP, all these new tests. We didn't have those. We didn't have people saying this is a global economy, right? And you got to compete globally. So it's a new world. We might not have gone to preschool, but these children very definitely need to. Who will we have today? We will have some, this is new. We'll have a bunch of men sitting here talking about little babies, okay? But they have a wealth of knowledge. Let me introduce these folks for you. If my phone will work. All right. That's new. All right, here we go. Kenyatta Brame, Executive Vice President, Cascade Engineering. Kenyatta serves as Executive Vice President of Cascade Engineering. He oversees the business services functions, which support the human services, quality, administrative, information systems. He's doing a lot of things over there, but more importantly, to our point, his extensive community involvement has included board memberships with Heartside Ministries, Alternative Directions, Grand Rapids Sister Cities, and the Grand Rapids Art Museum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Rick DeVore.
Oh. I gotta feel the love.
Rick DeVore is Regional President of Detroit and Southeast Michigan at PNC Financial Services Group, where he oversees the business strategy and community investments in the region for one of the largest diversified financial services organizations. Most recently, he served as PNC's Chief Credit Executive for commercial lending and has held numerous business line management roles throughout his career. We'll talk a lot today about PNC's investment and preschool in Detroit. It's really interesting. I've been writing about it for years. Thank you, Rick. Rip Rapson is President and CEO of the Kresge Foundation. Rapson began his career as a legislative assistant to U.S. Rep. Don Frazier, served as a partner at Leonard Street and Denard in Minneapolis in the 80s, and later served as deputy mayor of Minneapolis. I bet you didn't know that. Serving as the primary architect of its neighborhood revitalization program. Most recently, he served as president of the Mackinac Foundation. Joe Scantlebury. Where are you, Joe? Come on. Vice President for Program Strategy at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. In his role, he leads, designs, and implements strategic programming efforts to improve the lives of vulnerable children and families in the foundation's priority places such as Michigan, Mississippi, New Mexico, and New Orleans, and internationally in Haiti and Mexico. Prior to joining the foundation, he served as Senior Program Officer for U.S. Program Advocacy at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in D.C. Come on down.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here. You're sitting there. Okay, so we're going to, again, keep the conversation about education and health, kids 0 to 5. I'm going to start by telling you some of the things I hope we get from this conversation, and then we'll get into it. We're going to talk about the role of business in early childhood education and development. We're going to talk about policy considerations, what can and should be done moving forward in the business community and within our own communities. And we're talking about the roles of the different sectors that also includes, of course, philanthropic leaders. So let's start with the easy one. Okay.
Have a seat.
I'm going to have a seat. Let's talk about the Grow Up Great really quickly. Give us an overview. Tell us, why would PNC put $100 million in pre-K, and what are you seeing out of it?
Well, we did something maybe unique in 2004. We asked our employees where they wanted to see our philanthropy. I would say that our approach prior to that was peanut butter, kind of spread it around and hope for good results. And we decided to be more targeted, ask our employees, and then it came through pretty resounding that it was going to be early childhood. With that said, we're bankers, we're not educators, and you've already pointed out we're males. And I will say I do have grandchildren and children, and I do.
That counts.
But with that said, we formed a national advisory board. There's somebody, in fact, from the Skillman Foundation on our national advisory board. We partnered with not only the Rogers Foundation, but also Sesame Street's our partner. So we developed this curriculum. And we really think from a business sense, where are our new employees going to come from, where's our new shareholders going to come from, and where's our new customers going to come from? And we have passion around the fact that we don't think payday lenders should be the banks. They think it should be the banks, and it behooves us to make sure we get involved in education.
But everyone
It has
doesn't
to be
really
early.
know what Great
What we
Start
do?
does. Yeah, what do you do? Give us some examples.
Well, we're in 28 DPS classrooms right now.
I'm sorry, I said Great Start. Grow Up Great.
But Grow Up Great, we're in 28 DPS classrooms. We're also in classrooms throughout the state, not just in Metro Detroit, in Lansing, Grand Rapids, et cetera. In addition to that, we have partnered, we've had some pretty unique partnerships. Our main partners in Grow Up Great in Detroit would be Cranbrook on the Science DPS Foundation, and then also the Music Hall for Performing Arts. With that said, though, we have 19 other partners in Metro Detroit that we grant funds to. But we've also partnered with Skillman and Max and Marjorie Fisher on Say and Play with Words, trying to close the 30,000 word gap by kindergarten. We've also partnered with the Penske Foundation on fifth gear program. So we try to go out and forward, because we can't do it all, right? And so we're trying to do as much as we can, and we're trying to leverage our investment, and that's why with these two gentlemen, I'm also on the collaborative, the Head Start Collaborative.
I remember the first time I wrote about the Grow Up Great, I met some preschool kids at the Children's Museum in Detroit, and that was funded, it was a field trip funded by the PNC
Right.
Grow Up Great. So those are the types of things that this $100 million go towards.
Yeah, and it's really important, you know, our funding, we're pretty unique in the sense that my funding comes from the PNC Foundation of Pittsburgh, but the decisions are made localized. So, you know, the heads of Grand Rapids, Lansing, and Detroit, we make the decisions on a local basis. And I think that really resonates in the community.
Definitely. So Kenyatta, what are the advantages to businesses getting into the pre-K arena? I mean, either by volunteering or putting in money, what do you get out of it?
All right, so let's talk about the advantages from a business perspective. I think the first advantage is that it gives us a competitive advantage for our community. I think it also provides us an opportunity to make sure that we have the talent pool that we need for our future. A lot of my words are going to be about understanding what our needs are and making sure we have those needs 20 years from now, 10 years from now. Because if we don't start doing something now, our needs won't be met in the future. And I realize this is not how a lot of traditional businesses think, but at Cascade Engineer, we're not a traditional business. We're a triple bottom line business. Has anyone heard of the term triple bottom line? It's good. I'm seeing more hands as I talk about this in the community. And so when I went to school, they taught us Friedman. And Friedman said the purpose of a business is to maximize profits, and that's it. And at Cascade Engineering, we don't believe that. We believe in a triple bottom line, meaning that profits are important, but equally important are people and the planet. And so we have strategies that focus on people. And so as part of these strategies, we look at our employees, but we also look at our community. And as we develop these strategies, we understand that there are barriers in our community, and in order for our future employees to be successful, we have to break down these barriers. So what are some of these barriers? Barriers could be racism, it could be generational poverty, but it also can be education. Now, before I started doing this work, I thought about education. I thought about it being a high school diploma or a college degree. That's what I thought about. But doing this work, it makes me look further and further upstream. Right, so now I'm thinking about babies. I'm thinking about kids that are 0 to 5 years old, because we realize that by third grade, up to third grade, they're learning to read. After third grade, they're reading to learn, right? And so if there are children who don't understand how to read at third grade, there's already a barrier for them. And I didn't think about that. Sometimes I talk to other business leaders and they say, hey, it's not our job to develop children.
Absolutely. I mean, it's their job to sell widgets or whatever they do.
But I believe that's old thinking. And I believe that companies, and particularly in Grand Rapids, we've come together as a community, we talk about this. We bring in businesses, we bring in nonprofits, we bring in foundations, and we have these conversations about early childhood development. Because if we don't do it now, in the future, we won't have that opportunity. And I can't have a successful business if we don't start planning now.
And what we've seen some businesses doing, you know, you have PNC bankers, money, foundation, you sprinkle it around, you grant it, but there are also opportunities where businesses are placing childcare facilities within their own within their facility, or somehow underwriting those, or the very basic business, I guess, investment of having insurance, where there's maternity leave and there's also benefits and health insurance that really lead to economic health and educational benefits for 0 to 5 kids. There are a lot of different ways that businesses can get involved.
So one of the things that we've done at Cascade Engineering is that we actually have an employee that works for the Department of Health and Human Services in our facility, right? And so people who are dealing with generational poverty have issues, particularly getting their kids early childhood development. And so by having this woman work in our facility, she's able to identify individuals who have these generational poverty issues and provide them services that they need. Often when I have conversations with other executives, they have no concept of the problems that people dealing with generational poverty deal with. In Grand Rapids, for example, we're about 95% of our kids in the public schools are free and reduced lunch. If you go 10 miles in any direction, it's probably 5%.
Right.
And so part of our problem as a community is that one half of the community doesn't understand what the other half is going through, right? And so if every child in our community had the same advantages of our children, we'd be in a much better place. And so what we're doing is trying to treat every child as if they're our children.
So having that person in your facility, it's what the school folks would call wraparound services. You're wrapping social services into your business facility, or right there, having that resource for your employees.
So there's really like a 3-pronged value proposition. If you just look at dollars and cents to me, there's obviously the value proposition of investing in children and the rewards that reaps as taxpayers, as employers, et cetera. But then there's 2 other value propositions. What you're talking about, like on a wraparound service in our Kalamazoo Operations Center, we have an emergency daycare.
Yes.
Because I don't think anybody that, either working mom or working dad or both parents work, don't realize the difficulty in the drama around if you miss your babysitting services. So we have that. But then there's also the volunteerism. People say, well, why does PNC Bank offer their employees 40 hours paid time off if they donate their time to early childhood? And I can tell you that, if you think about either retention or attraction on the margin, if we're paying similar salary as another bank, on the margin, we're going to keep that employee or attract them based on our philanthropy. Yep. So to me, there's more about the value proposition than the obvious one, which is the investment in the future of the children.
Right.
There's a good business case to be made for it.
Most definitely.
So you said the word philanthropy. Rip and Joe, talk to us about this cross-section collaborative team effort for preschool. And
You gotta hold hands.
Yeah. That's later. Yeah.
what are the goals here, and what do you need other folks to do to help you reach those goals?
Can I maybe recast the question just a little bit? Sorry, Chastity.
It's your
Should know
floor.
better than
It's
to
your
do that
floor,
with you.
baby. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I actually would love to sort of take us into sort of the political realm. I mean, I think it is increasingly clear what the benefits of these early years preparation are. I think it's increasingly clear that there are extraordinary models, all not across just our region, but all across the country. And so why aren't we there? I mean, what is it that has been sort of the impediment to creating the kind of universality of opportunity that we're talking about? And I think it comes from
Is it money, or is it understanding the problem?
I would actually argue that it's neither. I actually think that there is money to be aggregated around these questions, and I think whether it's state money or federal money, Head Start money, whether it's local business community money, whether it's philanthropic money, I think one way or another you can assemble capital to the purpose. I think increasingly people understand, but I think it's just execution. And I think particularly in Detroit, what you have is a system that is so fragmented and so sort of dispersed across so many domains that it's very difficult for us to sort of think about how to actually pull pieces together, how actually to model the best behaviors, how to feather into the K-3 system. I mean, there are all of these sort of complicated how do you do it questions. And I think one of the reasons that it's exciting to have Kresge pair up with, I think, what is without question the finest early childhood philanthropy in America, Kellogg, is that I think if we are to sort of signal to at least the Detroit community, let's start somewhere. If we can signal to the Detroit community that you can actually thread those issues together, you can begin creating sort of systems of care and support in a neighborhood or in a set of neighborhoods, I think you begin modeling for the PNCs of the world or the Cascades of the world that this actually is the kind of investment they should make. So I think if you can kind of lead with strategy, lead with coherence, I think you actually invite different players to the table with higher levels of confidence.
Yeah, and I would just add, first of all, for all of you who are really listening, what these men shared was brilliant. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
I mean, they in effect said in sum, this is about business, but it's about long-term thinking in business. It's not just about short-term balance sheets. It's about people, it's about services, it's about talent, it's about human capital, both short-term and long-term. I'm a relative newcomer to the Kellogg Foundation, as you heard. And one of the things about being part of an 85-year foundation is that you learn all the things that we've already forgotten. Mm-hmm. And one of the things about the founder, W. Keith Kellogg, early on, he decided to invest in people. And what I hear from these business leaders and in our partnership with Kresge, what we're really seeking to do is invest in the people of Michigan, the people of Detroit, who have a commitment to children. Because from our perspective, if you invest in children, you reap long-term benefits. You reap the benefit of having children be ready for school, obviously, be healthy because you start talking about health needs. Emergency daycare, my God. Had I had, as a non-custodial dad, when I had my child, and I was taking him to work with me, right? And my employer would go, this isn't a daycare center, right?
Right.
I was wishing for someone I could just say, could just watch him for a few hours? Yeah. It's that kind of need that keeps fathers employed. It's that kind of need that keeps mothers employed and sane and present at work.
But Joe, talk to us more specifically, Joe and Rip, about this partnership. What does it look like? Mm-hmm. What happens? How do you impact the community by bringing all these pieces together? Well, I mean, really, what does it look like?
So if Rip had canvas, he could draw it for you. And it would be brilliant. Mm-hmm. He's got a gift there. I would say to you from the Kellogg perspective, it is not our laying out a blueprint as much as us inviting partners, including the business community, the political community, the leadership community. We just had a great talk with Mayor Duggan, who was looking for support in this area as well. It's an opportunity to come together with the resolve that there is no child in the city of Detroit that we're not going to at least open a door to opportunity so they can be prepared. It's that resolve. How you design that, it'll depend on the neighborhood and the communities, Rip.
Yeah, but I think we got to do something, right? I mean, we will meet, we will try to sort roles, we will try to be supportive to the other sectors, but I think that there are things that our respective foundations do well. And on the Kresge side of the equation, I think that we're particularly good with hardwiring systems, physical infrastructure. So we've already arranged with a national lending institution to come in and help create a sort of a rehabilitation fund, a renovation fund for
schools or daycare centers?
Daycare centers.
Okay.
Daycare centers.
And that's big because half of the kids in Detroit who need it aren't able to be served.
Yeah, I think, depending on how you slice the data,
right.
They're only about 40% of the kids are getting into the slots they need, and of that, probably only 20% are high quality slots. And so the imperative of upgrading what we have is critical, and we're working, again, with this loan fund to create a revolving fund that will help do that. You can help by providing small grants to daycare providers, early childhood care providers, to do whatever is necessary to upgrade their facilities. We just announced an initiative that will make $15,000 grants available to early childhood care providers. You can perhaps even model new kinds of centers. We are behind the curve a little bit in Detroit in having sort of multi-service, multi-purpose, high-quality early learning centers that touch parents, that touch kids, that touch residents in different ways. I think what I would argue is that unlike so much of educational policy, which is just infinitely complex and elusive, we know what works in early childhood. There are lots of things that work. I mean, to Joe's point, I mean, there are lots of things that work. There are lots of things that the community has to sort of really take a hold of and drive in a powerful way that can't be sort of superimposed. But we do know that there are building blocks that you can put in place that work. Early maternal screening, parental education, one-stop shopping for wraparound services. There's a bunch of stuff we can do, and it's been done in Pittsburgh and Minneapolis and Omaha and name the city, and it's been done. And so I think we actually have the advantage of having a real head start in getting some of these building blocks in place.
I think business is a little late coming to the game because probably a lot of these people in this room understand what works, but often business does not understand it and what role we're playing in it. So one thing we're doing in Western Michigan is we have a group called Talent 2025.
Yes.
And the premise of that group is that we want to see a difference in our community by 2025. And they got different groups. And one of the groups that they put together is early childhood development. So they can, in part, educate business about what we need to do. And so what's cool about Western Michigan is we bring all these people to the table. So you have businesses, you have nonprofits, you've got foundations, and you've got governments, all same table.
Scary.
There's no fighting, and we're trying to solve problems. And so one of the goals out of this is to come up with the best practices. And so then we can universally try to do that in Western Michigan.
And just to go back to your question again, one of the ways in which we're collaborating is, so Rick is speaking about infrastructure. One of the things the Kellogg Foundation has done all across the country is to figure out ways how to support communities in this process. How do you bring community partners in so we can identify that grandmother who is taking care of 5 kids, none of whom are her own,
Right.
but she's a critical player, a trusted partner, and maybe she could use some information about where resources lie in a community, where tools are to help her promote literacy in her household, which programs should her kids be watching when they are going to watch TV, because let's be real, they're going to watch some TV.
Yeah.
So beyond that, it's that kind of thing we can do at a very community level, and we think it's very important to reach children where they are, not always waiting for the new to come, but let's figure out how to get to where they are.
We've gone all this time and we've not talked about the watershed moment in 2013-14 when the state said, okay, we get it.
Yeah.
$65 million. Oh, and here's another $65 million. That was a watershed moment.
Huge.
And it was huge. It said, look, we know this is important. And, Bridge Magazine, we were right there saying, look at these 30,000 forgotten 4-year-olds to really push that conversation and put the money into pre-K. So what now, though? I mean, money's always a big ask in Michigan, right? What now, though? What are the other policy gaps that we need to address? Of course, we want to continue to say, more money so that we can make this a universal thing. But what are the other policy gaps?
And I'm not sure it's a policy gap, but I would definitely say that we can't, this isn't like winners and losers, like K-12 suffers because pre-K won, or higher ed loses because. But the other thing that I want to just underscore what Joe and Rip were saying, we have to have a delicate balance, though, of not being too prescriptive, offering these resources, but it has to be on a community by community basis. Bankers can't come in and say, here's how to do it in your community.
Right, don't tell people what to do, work with them.
Exactly, and so it might be different in Southwest Detroit than it is in Brightmoor, and it's really important to enroll those partners. I think all of us would say we've learned sometimes the hard way that if you're too prescriptive, I'm smarter than you, it doesn't go over well. And so I really think that at the end, bringing those partners in is just so important. And by the way, for the record, I wanted to point out I'm the only person without a tie, and I'm a banker. So. I'm just saying, it's a little different. But,
Game on.
Feeding your own drug.
It doesn't happen often. But I think there has to be that balance. You have to really be careful of that.
We're all here. We're all from Michigan. We all have state legislators and a governor. What do we need to be pushing right about now? We're talking education and health-wise. Do we need, like you said earlier, more maternal education, more pre-0 to 3 attention? Where are our policy gaps?
I'll go first, or try to, but I will tell you that the word came up earlier, or the phrase, but I think there's still a gap in terms of wraparound services. Hey, you can have the world's greatest daycare, but if you can't get there, you can't get there. You know, in Detroit, how many families do not even have a car? You know, if you've ever traveled with a child or a family to school and do bus transfers and yellow buses and green and white buses. And so, I mean, I think there's still, in my mind, is a gap on wraparound services before and after school, transportation. Right. Those things still seem to be a gap in my mind.
Can I build just a little bit on that? Because I think we often forget the power of an educational presence, whether it's a high school, a junior high, a preschool, in creating one of the essential building blocks of a healthy community. When we think about pivoting into the Detroit neighborhoods and trying to bring into the neighborhoods some of the same prosperity and energy and optimism that we've seen downtown and along the corridor, I think you begin to understand that it's a little bit housing, it's a little bit commercial corridor development, it's a little bit wraparound services, but it's clearly education in many ways at the core. And unless you can create complete neighborhoods in which all of those possibilities are available to be tapped, I think we're losing a moment. And I would argue, and this may not be something that people on the panel would agree with, is I would not make early childhood moves absent that context. I think you have to embed your early childhood work in some broader sense of where the community is, what are its capacities, what are its opportunities, what are its capital gaps, what are its networking gaps, before you actually begin sort of engaging the community in a larger conversation about, do you want a child care center here, or do you want sort of a different renovation project over here? It's got to be all part of a piece.
Yeah, and I think I would add on I hear the policy question that you're asking. So we've gotten $130 million, great. Let's extend that to third grade, to 3-year-olds. Let's make sure that we keep on bringing those resources forward so that more students can take advantage of the opportunities we've created. That's one. 2, let's make sure the linkage is really, really clear between maternal health, breastfeeding, employers, access to breastfeeding, time for breastfeeding, so that the nutrition that children have at that early stage actually helps to foster brain development on through. I know we have Dr. Mona here from Flint, one of the real heroes of that work. And you know, in all of her comments, she speaks about nutrition. She speaks about all the holistic ways that you have to help children overcome what may be in their environment. And some of what's in their environment, let's just be candid, may not always be toxins from water. Can sometimes be toxins and stress from a community. True. And they bring that to
Could be fast food.
Could be fast food. But they bring that to school as well. They bring that to out in the society. And part of the early learning benefit is that you walk in, if you're in high quality early child care, you walk in ready, both socially, emotionally, ready for school, ready to learn, ready for opportunities, and ready to get on that path to attain knowledge after third grade.
And I asked that question about policies and where the gaps are because the question is, okay, so what can we do? What should we be doing as, you know, professionals and as Michigan residents? What can or should we be doing? What legislation or what movement should we be standing behind? And that begs the question of what has momentum right now? Is it nutrition? Is in your communities? What pre-K, early child development issue has momentum? Is it we have to get every kid in preschool? Is it we need to get daycare centers, quality daycare centers in is there 1 or 2 or 3, quickly, issues that have good momentum that we as Michigan residents should get behind right now?
I'll say quickly, equity for all children, all children, all children. Intentional plans, intentional resolve, and making sure that all children are on a path from birth to career, but on a path, all children.
Yes.
And that resolve we just have to have.
Yeah, we love our children, but do we love all children?
We have to, what I'm saying is that even if we don't believe that that is where I begin, we have a beach in Detroit that was not here before. If we can create a beach in Detroit, we can take care of all children.
Downtown, right?
I would simply say that I think we tend to assume that policy means federal policy and state policy. There's an enormous amount of local policy, and local policy is backbreaking one way or another. How you zone, how you redevelop neighborhoods, how you link housing to essential services. All of that is fundamentally a question of municipal policy. And so I think we just have to get going on this. We have no time to waste. This is a burning platform. And as we try to figure out the K-12 system, and we will one way or another, we can't wait for that to get resolved. And I think the best way to do it is start community by community, whether it's Grand Rapids or the east side of Detroit, and begin sort of going to our elected officials locally and saying, here are a suite of things that we need that will make our work easier, or that will lift certain regulatory issues that make our work harder. I mean, whatever it is, I think we can get a lot more creative about local policy.
I would agree. I think we need to start somewhere. I would recommend jumping in. I don't mean without checking if there's water in the pool, but I mean, I think people need to be involved, and it needs to be involvement beyond financial. And I think when you see, how you labor, when you go to these centers, when you go to the pre-K or even third grade, second, first, third grade, I think that's really where it really resonates. I think nutrition does have momentum. I think, obviously, unfortunately, it has, momentum for maybe bad reasons, but also, I hope we have momentum on the Senate bill, but I'm not quite sure. It depends which way the wind's blowing out there. But so I don't want to forget K-12 either.
So often when I hear policy, I hear in the back of my mind, someone saying government needs to come in and fix this problem. And so when I think about policy, I'm more towards you. I think about what we should be doing as a community, and then we can get our governments involved and say, this is what we think is working, help us solve this problem, rather than going to them saying, hey, this is our problem, you fix it. Because we don't believe in Western Michigan that government can fix all of it. I'm not trying to make a political statement. I'm saying that the community is what fixes a problem of this nature. And trying to piecemeal it one group at a time is not going to be effective.
I've seen or heard from you guys some different things that businesses are doing, can do, should do. A few of the smaller efforts, and you tell me, have you seen these efforts, and would you add to the list? Some of the things that we've seen businesses do, again, is provide enough insurance and flex time and things of those natures. But sometimes when we see businesses that are getting involved in improving early childhood health and education, they're doing small things like putting little bulletins in the paycheck that give people information about where they can find the services they need. That's it's not as big as putting a health and human services person in your facility, but those are some of the things that we see that businesses do when they recognize that there's, a need for education of the community, as you would say. Encouraging wraparound services in the schools as well as in the businesses. Supporting the increase of funding and promoting the coordination of your health and your education services together, which is sort of what you guys are also talking about. What initiatives are your companies involved in that focus on more of the health things? We've talked a lot about education. I want to talk more about the health.
So one of the things and I didn't make this connection, we just added breastfeeding rooms in our facilities. And, but I did make the connection between that and all the other things that we're talking about. And sometimes when we're making some decisions, we need to have more connectivity into all these thoughts. But one thing we also do is that we bring our partners into our community to actually talk to our employees rather.
Say that again?
We bring some of our partners in to come talk about childcare, talk about other services. Hearing it from their employer is one thing, but hearing it from the person that's providing the service is a different thing. We find that has a different impact, so people can sometimes they don't want their boss involved in all their business, so you bring in these partners and they can share that service with them and they're able to go out and get that service provided to them.
Right. On that note, I have a question here. It says, why don't more businesses offer these services on site? Is there a cost factor here? Services being child development, or whether it's daycare or having a wraparound social service person. Why don't we see that? Where are the barriers to that?
I think the biggest barrier is often business doesn't think it's their place. And so we're a privately held corporation, so we have the advantage of being able to think long-term. And we have the advantage of being able to develop these relationships with our community partners.
Does it cost you any money to have this social service person?
See, now you're getting to the finance. So, I'm
getting nosy.
When we think about costs, and so if you try to just keep those costs inside your facility, it could be a negative, right? But when you think about the cost and the benefit to the community, it becomes a positive really quickly. So I think it's how you do your math. And so there is some additional costs. So if you look at our P&L, there's some expenses in there, but we don't think those expenses outweigh the benefit to our employees and to our communities.
Gotcha.
And Rick, I mean, you said earlier that your possibility of retaining high talent employees goes through the roof.
It's kind of a qualitative analysis and a quantitative. Because it's hard for me to quantify that. But it is on the margin we know we retain and attract employees. For us, maybe one of our issues is at the Kalamazoo Operations Center, we have a critical mass of about 1,700 employees. It's easy to have an emergency daycare there. But to have an emergency daycare in every one of our branch locations probably would be cost prohibitive. So, and then it gets kind of dicey because we're a public corporation and it's the mom loves you best. You like the Kalamazoo people, but you don't like Detroit people. But so we try to do that, but also I think it's in flexible benefits. It starts there where, we have very unique relationships with father leave time. I wish they had that when I had children. But a lot of other benefits that are customized. We've had, I say this in public and people ask me to repeat it sometimes, but we've had, for instance, same-sex partner benefits since 2003. So we really try to be, I think, more forward-looking on some of these things. And so I just think it makes sense.
Chastity, can I just add one thing from my previous life in Minneapolis?
Please.
15 years ago, we put together a regional business consortium that tried to identify what would be a sort of a regional business plan for Minneapolis-St. Paul. And we assumed that we would get lower taxes, lower regulation, a bunch of other stuff. What we got was transit, early childhood development, and health disparities. And when the business community latched as a community, as opposed to individually enlightened businesses, when they latched onto that, and the head of Cargill, and the head of General Mills, and the head of Medtronic began talking about early childhood and best practices and the desirability of having that in their sites, you saw an enormous flip. I mean, it took 3, 4, or 5 years, but you could begin to see businesses increasingly looking to their peers and thinking of it less as sort of a social service, nonprofit, philanthropic imperative, and more as a business imperative. It was an extraordinary acts of leadership on the part of the Minneapolis-St. Paul business community. And I think that there is just no reason in the world that we ought not to do that in Michigan. This ought to just be one of the top 2 or 3 things that our business community, as a community, grabs onto and drives.
And one of the things that philanthropy can do in a very helpful way for business is to do the R&D, to share what you've learned, what others have learned, and to make sure that that's available for anyone else who wants to try to embark on this journey with us and with you. So there are things we can do to help ease the road and ease the learning curve, because there's a cost associated with that as well.
Yeah, we know that the economic and health benefits are there when children do well, and when they're healthy and they're in pre-K, they're going to outperform other kids on tests, they're going to go to college more, they're going to get better jobs, all that is wonderful. But when you as a business offer benefits to your staff that will help them to make their children more healthy, you are a more attractive place to work, correct? You're going to attract more employees, and that's of course, that's a given, correct?
Yep, attract and retain.
Attract and retain.
The rehire process is very expensive, and so I think if you, on the margin, can retain your workforce, and I would also say that this next generation is much more socially aware than my generation.
True.
And that's what gives me a lot of hope. And I really think these kinds of things, whether it's flex time, whether it's, donating your time, these benefits of maybe father at home leave or whatever, are much more important to them than they were people my generation. And so I really think that these kinds of benefits have to flex in that direction, and they need to do it now.
I often find that when I graduated from school, people just ask, what city are you going to and how much money you're going to make? Yep. When I'm doing interviews now, I get tough questions about what is your organization doing in your community? And so I'm looking across the table from a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
They're challenging me about what commitments that we have. So you're right. I think this
Philanthropy
generation
used to be
looks
for
at it
the
differently.
older folks.
Exactly.
And you get to do that when you get up to the
Yeah.
C-suite.
Yeah.
And now it needs to start day one when you start.
Yeah. So I think the concept of business making a bunch of money so you can give some money away, I think that concept is dying. And so what we're trying to do, and we don't use the word philanthropy in our business, what we're trying to do is become a part of this community so we can provide services and provide the benefits to we think about it in terms of benefits to the community, not necessarily as philanthropy.
Question from the audience. There are a lot of community organizations that offer comprehensive nutritional and social development and academic support for children 0 to 5, but they're under-resourced.
Absolutely.
What do we do?
One of the things I think the collaboration that we're trying to stitch together can do is to create more of a sense of network and sort of peer sharing so that people can talk one to another, sort of understand kind of what the challenges are, whether they're capital challenges, physical rehab challenges, training challenges, quality challenges. And I think that out of that, we will be able to surface a whole suite of possibilities for organizations like Kresge and Kellogg, or 10 others you can name, to actually begin investing in what the community is telling us it needs. I think right now it's a little bit of a scattershot. I mean, because it's so fragmented, it's so hard to know where you could actually invest dollars that will be absorbed and sort of taken up in the most effective ways. And I think if we can begin to have a more concerted conversation about that, I think what we're going to see is patterns emerge out of community that become more investable.
I think that's a great answer, but I'd only add to that answer and simply say we also have to help people have tough conversations. So there are a lot of organizations that do great work, and they do great work with the cohort that they have. Now, if you said to them, well, we want you to scale just a little bit more, you might break that organization because they don't have the capacity. So one of the things that philanthropy always struggles to do is how do you build capacity without creating the kind of dependency on a funder who may be here for a long time, but may not be here forever. So what is the path? And what a lot of people sometimes miss is that in the service industry, that's a business too. That's paying someone's salary too. That's paying someone's rent too. How do you help that organization thrive and survive when they may only know one funding source? They may only have a limited view of what's possible. They may not know that there are partnerships to be built and contracts to be cut with other entities who, frankly, they didn't think about.
It's networking. Good. So, last question here is, okay, so PNC, $100 million investment. The philanthropic community, millions on millions of dollars being invested, right? You're doing the work in your community. You have your workers, with the help they need on site. What if I'm a small mom and pop shop? My workers have kids too. My community has kids too. How do I get into this when my resources are limited? I'm, a mom and pop shop. I might be the barbecue place on the east side of Detroit with 6 employees. How do I help?
Sure.
I would say that, I think we need to be able to piggyback on some of these resources, because I think right now the mischief, there's anxiety with people. They're not trying to put other groups out of business. They're just saying, I think we need to shift the resources from the back office to where the kids are. Right. And if you look at and so I think we need to do a better job also for that company.
I want to provide flexible, supportive services, but I can't afford it.
Yep.
So, well, but I think we need to basically go through some learnings that we've all learned, and the economics of that, of what did that do? Why does this make sense to you from not just doing the right thing, but also from an economic standpoint, or making sure there's a suite of services that are available, in terms of help on these different issues. Because you're not big enough to buy in bulk, and I understand what you're saying, but I think that's really that's kind of an offshoot of what they're talking about. What I'm worried about in this conversation is people think that they're going to lose their job at other not-for-profits because we're taking over the back office. And that's not what they're trying to do. It's more of a best practices. But I do think we should be in service of getting more money on the street. is what I'm getting at.
And I think we agreed. Part of our collaboration is just
Hard stop.
It says 0.
no overtime.
No overtime. These people have places to go and things to do. I want to say thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you for the conversation and the information.